Developed and facilitated diversity training for corporate and church leaders for 2 decades. His degrees in psychology and religious education adds to his perspective. Tony's diversity discussions took a personal turn in 2014 when he began documenting conversations with his white grandchildren about race. He will offer glimpses of those conversations as an invitation to tell our own stories. Tony is a contributor to Rhetoric, Race and Religion, and he blogs inconsistently at T-Dads, Per, and Raw. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Anthony Peterson.
Well, thank you. Damon was 5 years old when he asked his Aunt Kimberly the question, "Lily, am I black or am I white?" She answered a little bit simplistically. She said, "Well, your daddy's white, and your mommy's white, so you're white." Well, for Damon, that wasn't exactly a satisfactory answer, because his response was, "When I grow up, I'm going to be black." Now, Damon wasn't confused about his basic colors, but so why would a 5-year-old ask such a strange question? He already knew that it mattered, and at 5 years old, he had already attached value to race. And he wanted answers to questions that we don't want to answer. But we have to start answering race questions, and we have to start answering with the truth. We tell children that race is real, but that race doesn't matter, when the opposite is actually true. Race is not real, but race does matter. If that sounds crazy, let's look at the evidence. I was in 6th grade, living in Hawaii, when I decided I was going to be an anthropologist. I wanted to study human cultures. So to support my decision, my parents got me the book, The Color of Man by Robert Cohen. And I learned from that book that the color of our skin is determined by the amount of pigment in our skin, especially the pigment melanin. So darker skinned people have a lot of melanin, and lighter skinned people have less melanin. But I also learned that while anthropologists are very clear about those different skin colors, they've long abandoned the idea of races associated with skin color. There is no culture in color. There are no muscular or mental abilities associated with melanin. There are no character traits, no virtues, no vices, no values associated with skin color. And yet, from a very early age, we start teaching children that skin color is different from all other kinds of color, and we don't tell them why. So when Elliot was four years old, he's almost 8 now. When Elliot was 4 years old, he was obsessed with the human body. And it's not that sort of normal 4-year-old obsession with body parts. So here's an example. He started lecturing me one day. It's a lecture I'd heard before, but he was telling me about the human body. He was telling me about the respiratory system, the part the lungs and the diaphragm play, and he told me about the respiratory. I used to know this exactly. The digestive system, the part that the esophagus and the large and small intestines and the stomach play, and he taught me that the brain is the control center for the entire body. If he were here, he'd be lecturing you too, and he might even draw a picture. Oh, there's Elliot and his love of the human body, and there's the picture. So I was getting a little bored with the lecture because I'd had it before, and I stopped him and I said, "Elliot, "What color is my skin?" And without even looking at me, he said, "It's black." And then I said, "What color is your skin?" There was a long pause. And then he said, "Gray?" If we pay attention, we can catch our kids in mid-indoctrination. Elliot had learned what to call the color of my skin, but he had not yet been schooled in what to call the color of his own skin. And he had not been told why we call this brown black and we call that pinkish color white. Of course, our notions of race go beyond skin color to other kinds of physical traits and abilities. I learned the word anthropology from my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Waite. My best friend Ted and I used to stay after school in 6th grade and pick Mr. Waite's brain. And one of those days, he told us about a U.S. senator who believed that black people were not very intelligent, but that they could run fast and jump high. Now, that U.S. senator, of course, was not the first prominent American to believe those sorts of things. According to historian Winthrop Jordan, who wrote White Man's Burden, which you can get out there, Thomas Jefferson, our 3rd U.S. president, struggled with the differences between the races. And so that man who wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal," didn't quite believe that. He continually wondered whether the black man, as he put it, was truly made of the same stuff with the same abilities as the white man and the people he called Indians. Jefferson actually wanted to believe that we were equal, but he never came to that conclusion. As Ted and Mr. Waite and I talked about these situations and looked around our own multicultural classroom, we had to laugh because the intellectual stereotypes did not fit the people in our classroom, and the athletic stereotypes fared even worse. Many of us also believe that race is somehow connected to what we call bloodlines, and we say we can trace our races back to 3 or 5 pure bloodlines. But again, the science doesn't back that up. There are no pure races, and there never have been. I apologize for giving you all old news. This is old news. It's not the domain of just the elite experts. It's been knowable for a long time. But most of us don't know it because in our lives, we follow a stubbornly ingrained false narrative. So, if race is not real, why talk about it? We have a bunch of reasons not to talk about it. We believe that any mention of race means there's going to be winners and losers, heroes and villains, angels and demons. We believe somebody's going to get called a racist. And we might believe somebody should be called a racist. We don't agree on what racism is. We don't even agree on what race is. We believe that race is the domain of some people, but not of other people. And we believe that any mention of race exaggerates our differences, minimizes our similarities, and exacerbates our problems. But we must talk about it anyway. In her TED Talk, Colorblind or Color Brave, Melody Hobson lays out the case for diversity in all walks of life, but especially in businesses and boardrooms. And she also says that we need to pursue this diversity for the sake of the children. So recent studies have told us a little bit of where children get their racial ideas. In 2014, Allie Michael and Eleonora Bartoli described what they found in a study of white parents and their white adolescent children. They interviewed the parents and the children both together and separately. And they found the parents reported teaching their children, do not be racist, do not talk about race, do not say the word black, and do not notice racial differences. They wanted to teach their children that everyone is the same and that racism is bad. And they defined racism as overt, violent, and for the most part, obsolete. But the message the children reported were incomplete and conflicting. The children reported learning the messages, everyone is the same, race is superfluous, and hard work alone is the key to success. They also reported some views of certain racial groups, including the belief black people are lazy, black people are poor, black neighborhoods are dangerous, and black people are physically stronger than white people. Sounds a little like the sentiments from that US senator years ago. I don't suspect that this type of socialization is exclusive to white families. The racial mixed messages we send children transcend our family dynamics or our family histories. Our family was gathered in Columbus, Ohio in the year 2000 for my dad's burial. After the service, we drove to my cousin's house for a meal, and I was driving the van that my white wife, Laura, had driven up from Nashville to shuttle us all around. And so in the van, I was driving the van, my wife was in the passenger seat, and in the back were my mother, my siblings, my uncles, all African American. And we pulled up to my cousin's apartment, and there was a car in front of us, and there was an older white couple getting out of the car, and they were having trouble getting out of the car. And we're all getting impatient because we want to park and get to our place. And so we're sitting there, and one of my relatives, who I won't identify, said out loud, "Do you see these people? They see us. They know we're here. They're being slow on purpose." He said, "White people always do this." And all the chatter in the van kind of cut out. And then this anonymous relative spoke up, and he said, "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that." Now, as a family, we laugh about that now. Mainly, we laugh about it because we know that he didn't really mean that. We know this relative, and that isn't even, that's not his world. But sometimes we have these racial conversations for a number of different reasons. Too often, when it comes to ethnicity, to color, to race, we have those conversations, but we don't have them in polite company and we don't have them in mixed company. They come up when something happens in our national culture, as Andrea mentioned. O.J. Simpson, 9/11, President Barack Obama, Ferguson, travel bans, Sandra Bland, Charleston, Philando Castile, Charlottesville, border wall, DACA. These things happen in our culture, and we hear pundits and politicians, media folks speaking about these things, and we cultivate our own ideas, and we might share those ideas with people around us who we think, we hope, are like-minded with us. But we also hear views from people who might be close to us, who are expressing something that we've never heard before and never knew that they held. And we realize that race does matter. These incidents happen, and our children who are taught to be colorblind, okay, that slide's not there, um, are blindsided. And there are opportunities, and there are incidents in our personal lives. It was the night in 2014 when Casey was born. Her siblings, then 10-year-old Damon, and 6-year-old Chelsea, and 3-year-old Zoe were staying the night with me while their parents and their grandmother went to the hospital for the baby. The next morning, I got up and viewed pictures on my tablet of the baby. And Chelsea, 6 years old, woke up and she looked at the pictures, but then she wanted that tablet to look up pictures of the Disney animated movie Frozen. And she wanted to look up pictures of Elsa, her favorite character. So she's looking through these pictures, and then she stops, and she sees this one picture, and she says, "What? That's not Elsa." This Elsa had dark brown skin. She said, "It's black. It's ugly." She's sitting right there, almost in my lap. What would you say? What would you do? I sat there frozen. And I thought, I could let it go, let it go. I can say, don't say that about black people. But I love our Chelsea, and I wanted to know more. So I said, you think black skin is ugly? And still a little shooken, she said, yes. And then just in a split second, she said, well, not your skin, but Elsa is not supposed to be black. And I could only agree with her. Now, to be clear, this particular Elsa was not well drawn. But what sounded like a racist sentiment from Chelsea, white skin is beautiful, black skin is ugly, was nothing of the sort. What was actually going on is I had to venture into that discomfort to probe a little more. And what I found is what she really meant was, I've seen this movie dozens of times, and Elsa has white skin and a long side braid, unless it's Coronation Elsa, and then the braid is up. That's how I know it's Elsa. What Chelsea taught in that moment is that our ethnicity is essential to our identity, even if you're an animated character. What followed was a loving and truthful racial conversation with 6-year-old Chelsea, 10-year-old Damon, and 3-year-old Zoe. 3 white children and their black grandfather. And there have been other opportunities. One of my favorite things to do around the holidays is to read aloud Christmas stories. And this year, we gathered Chelsea, who's now 10, Elliot, who's 7, Zoe is 6, Autumn, who's 5, and Casey, who is 3. And I was reading the story Maggie's Gift by Catherine Peterson. And in that story, it features Mr. McGee, a lonely and cranky older widower. He agrees to take an 8-year-old girl and her 5-year-old brother home on Christmas Eve because they can't stay in the children's home that night. As he's on the phone discussing the arrangements with Miss Trainer from the children's home, he asks, by the way, what color are the children? White, she says. Does it matter? Yes, he says. I have to know what color to get the doll. Now, I had read this story aloud many times, but this time I had to pause right there. And one reason is I had in the back of my mind the book Raising Raising White Kids, which just came out last month by Dr. Jennifer Harvey. And Dr. Harvey encourages parents of white children to take advantage of these moments to promote what she calls race consciousness. For her, race-conscious parenting involved noticing and naming race early and often. So I paused the story to explain to my white grandchildren, when this story was written, many people believed that white children should only have white baby dolls and black or brown children should only have black or brown baby dolls. And I was a little amused that I had to explain to them the difference between now and then. But Chelsea picked up the narrative. She said, yeah, in those days, black people and white people couldn't be together. If you were a white person and you wanted to marry a black person, you couldn't do it. And then she went through all these other forbidden marriage scenarios, racial marriage scenarios that she could think of. And then she said, but Martin Luther King came and he changed all that. And Elliot shouted, oh, I know him. And then Chelsea continued. Martin Luther King said, you can marry whoever you want. The color doesn't matter. It's like chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream. And you mix it all up and it's caramel. This was not the time to demonstrate how bad that analogy really was. But her loving and lovely sentiment came through. Zoe chimed in, my baby doll is brown. I know, I said, and I remember what you named her. I know because the day she brought the baby doll home from Dollar General, she introduced us. She said, Peepaw, this is my baby, and she's like you. I named her Moana. I'll call her my baby, but you call her Moana. Again, she's like you. I was gonna get the white one, but it was too much. I pushed just a little bit. Was the white one the same kind of doll? Yeah, she said, but this one was almost free. The white one was $10. Once again, I chose not to engage our first grader in the discussion of why the brown doll was almost free, because our race-conscious conversations don't have to occur all at once. We can circle back around and have that conversation later. And if we're paying attention, there'll be plenty other opportunities. When we talk openly with children about race, we don't burden them, we free them. We allow them to embrace an essential part of their own identity and also to embrace the identities of all other people they encounter. We handicap our children when we operate in racial silence, and we rob them of an essential part of their own identity. And I suspect that this is especially the case for white or gray people, children like Damon, Chelsea, Elliot, Zoe, Autumn, and Casey. The vision I long for is not post-racial, and where we ignore racial differences. What I long for, and I suspect you long for, is not post-racial, but post-racist society. A society where the destruction wrought by race and power is eliminated. Racism and its inequality still stubbornly exist. But those inequalities are only a symptom of something deeper in our national psyche. There remains the reality that race matters, and not always in positive ways. I believe that the road to a post-racist society, a society where our diversity is a virtue, must be paved on a commitment to embrace race. So how do we proceed? One way is to begin by taking our cues from the children. We start by answering truthfully. We stop telling them that race is not real, but then showing them that it is. We break our silence when children ask why some brown people are called brown and other brown people are called red or yellow or black or white. And if we really want to benefit from our diversity and demolish the strongholds of racism, we dare to tell the truth even before children ask. Tell them race is not real, but that race does matter, and tell them why. Damon, Chelsea, Zoe, and Casey's older brother is Christian. And when Christian was 11, when Damon was 5, Damon posed another question. We were sitting in a fast food restaurant, and Christian had already learned the rules of racial silence. So we're sitting there, and the two boys are sitting at a table separate from the adults and the babies. And just out of the blue, Damon walked over to my table and touched my skin, turned back to his brother and said, "I just want to know, what color is this?" Now, we could see the reticence on Christian's face. He did not want to answer this question. He had already learned those rules. And so I tried to break the tension for him, and I said, "Just answer the question." And Christian said, "It's brown." And Damon walked smugly back to his seat. That's all I wanted to know. He just wanted the truth. Thank you.